There is a secret that most pro athletes, elite CEOs, and high performers all know. They all have a group of world-class coaches working for them to help them optimize their potential. At Super Athlete Radio, our goal is to provide you with the caliber of world-class coaches and guests to help you unlock your potential, dominate your industry, and dominate your life. Let's get better today. Mike, welcome to Super Athlete Radio. How are you today?
Doing well, man. Thanks for having me on.
I'm really excited to have you on. You're in Los Angeles.
I am. Awesome.
And how long have you been out there?
I have been out here off and on for about 9 years. 9 years.
That's awesome. And what part of LA are you in? Just curious, my brother's out there.
I am in this little pocket in between West Hollywood and Beverly Hills.
Okay.
Yeah. Beautiful. Where's your brother at?
He's, I want to say Silver Lake.
Okay.
He works for Spring Hill Productions. He works for Maverick Carter and LeBron James's production company.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You might have a mutual connection. I know somebody who's doing some stuff with them as well.
Okay. Yeah. We'll connect after. Well, I'm really excited to have you on, Mike. I think what you're doing in terms of the leadership space and how you're incorporating background in basketball performance and kind of mindset is all really relevant to our audience. Before we get into what we're doing now, I'd love to hear a little bit about how you grew up and how you kind of got to where you are.
Yeah, man. I grew up in a super small town in the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin, about 15,000 people. To put it in perspective, you had to drive about 3.5 hours to get to either Minneapolis or Milwaukee. So when I say middle of nowhere, I really mean middle of nowhere. Some people are like, oh, I grew up in a small town, like 300,000 people outside of Chicago. I'm like, you don't know what a small town is. So I grew up there, played basketball my whole life, and was playing in college. And a friend of mine and I were having a conversation after, I think, my sophomore year in college. And we decided we wanted to run a summer basketball camp in our hometown because, as I explained, we were in the middle of nowhere, and there really were no other opportunities in that area for kids at that time besides one high school basketball camp during the summer. So we wanted to bring something different to the town. And we rented out a gym, rented out the YMCA in our hometown, organized a camp, got coaches together, printed T-shirts, designed flyers on my mom's computer in Microsoft Word, and got the word out, And first year we had 100 kids. Second year we had 200, and the third year we had 300 kids that showed up at this camp in a town of 15,000 people. And so at the time, I thought I wanted to get out of, once I got done with college, I thought I wanted to go into college coaching. And the challenge with that was that I played Division III college basketball. I didn't play at Duke. I didn't play at the Carolinas, right? To be able to get into at a Division I program. And that path was typically go to grad school, be a manager, do the laundry, clean the gym floor, right? Do that for 10 years, and then maybe you'll get a chance and build a network through that, right? And so I decided to go a different route and different path to that end goal. And it was building an AAU program. I thought, if I can coach these kids up, if we can build a successful program and these kids start getting recruited 2, 3, 4 years from now, that will be my way in to build a network with Division I college coaches. And it turned out that I was not a huge fan of scheduling tournaments and booking hotel rooms, and decided I just want to spend more time on the court with kids, and left that behind. Moved to Milwaukee. We opened up a training facility and really focused on the individual skill development for players.
And then, so it seems like from a young age, you took a lot of initiative on things in terms of starting the camp back home, making the adjustment, moving to Milwaukee, starting skill development there. What's something that you feel like has always driven you to be able to take initiative like that?
It's so funny you asked that, because I was actually thinking about this the other night, and there were other things that I did when I was younger, and I don't really know why. I just think maybe it was somewhere inside of me. I knew that if I wanted some of these things, that I had to do them myself. But I was the guy who would organize pickup basketball games. I remember having a notebook that was by my bedside that had the name and phone number of all the kids that were in our neighborhood in our town that would be able to get together and compete and play basketball. And I don't know, maybe like 11, 12 years old. And I was getting on the phone and calling people up. And, as I mentioned before, there were no club opportunities really where I was growing up. When I was in high school, I organized an AAU program when I was a junior in high school, got a coach for us, recruited the whole team, put it together. So I don't know. I don't know where that comes from. But I think, reflecting on it, it's just knowing that if you want to create something, you have to have a sense of agency around it. And you have to, you have to be the one that's going to put in the work to make it happen.
I love that. And then what were some of the takeaways from the skill development that you started doing with individual players in Milwaukee? What were the learning experiences that you had there?
Yeah, I mean, from like a mindset perspective or from a on-court perspective?
Let's start with the mindset.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I realized as we were building out our program, I realized this pretty early, was that players will never maximize their potential unless they're simultaneously working on their mind, their body, and their skills. That's kind of the triangle, right? Right. You can work on your individual skills, but if you don't take care of your body, you don't do injury prevention, you don't, work on your lateral movements, your first steps, your vertical, your functional movement, like you're never going to maximize your potential. And then and I think it's a interesting thing. And there's a shift that's happening right now in the basketball, in sports in general, is that everybody has always said, well, sports build mental toughness, sports builds character, sports builds, leadership qualities. And the truth is that they don't inherently within themselves, but they provide a container for a coach who has the skills to be able to use it as a training ground, right? Mm-hmm. And so the other thing we realize is that the mind is a factor, right? It's like, you can be long, you can be athletic, you can shoot it, you can handle it, you can have court awareness. But when the game is on the line, when there's 9 seconds left and you have the ball in your hands and you're down by 1 and you got to make a play, like the guy who is going to separate himself in that moment is the one who is operating with a higher level of focus, with a higher level of self-awareness, right, to be able to get into that state of peak performance when the game is on the line. And that's what's going to separate you when skills are equal, when your body is equal. And so those are some of the things that have kind of graduated from the skills to mindset and leadership and mindfulness, and bringing those into the corporate space.
And then that's where I was kind of actually going to want to go a little bit, based on what you just said on the answer, was you noticed early on that with basketball players that there needed to be more of a holistic approach beyond skill development in terms of taking care of their body and mindset and things like that. So look at it from the corporate perspective on that. How much do you feel like those things flow together in terms of do you believe it makes entrepreneurs, business executives, it makes their life easier professionally when they take care of their body, when they put in the effort on the mindset? Or do you feel like that's more effort that's just taking things away from their number one thing?
I think it's a balance, and I think it all comes down to intentionality. I think, one exercise that I did a long time ago was essentially audited my day. Every 30 minutes, you're writing out exactly what you're doing, how you're spending your time, and then you can reverse engineer that and look at like, how intentional am I actually being throughout the day? And the truth is there's a lot of studies that I think there's one from Duke that shows that we're actually only able to be in this state of productivity, this state of intense focus for about 2 hours a day. Now, obviously, this shifts from person to person. But when you look at it from that standpoint, it's like, how much time in my day am I not spending intentionally, right? Am I not spending in my areas of highest contribution? Am I not really in this area of deep focus. And I think when we can be more intentional about the deep work, but then also the deep recovery and the rest, I think that's finding that sweet spot, and what works for you is what's important.
Yeah, that's a consistent theme that we have here at Super Athlete is the ability to fully turn off. So then you can fully turn on again, where it feels like overall in general population, it's hard to people have a hard time. They don't really know what fully turned on is. It's everyone's kind of just like at kind of lukewarm. What are some strategies or tactics that you believe in terms of helping people oscillate and helping them being able to fully turn off and turn on?
Number one, creating space in your day, space in your calendar, morning routines, night, and a lot of people talk about morning routines, but a lot of people don't talk about nighttime routines, right? And knowing when you have to shut down. I think those are key. Now, with that being said, I think there's a caveat there. I think a lot of people, think that they have to have this, 9,000 minute morning routine where they're doing 17 million things in order for their day to be productive. I think a key is with that routine is being able to be extremely intentional with it, right? Make sure that your morning routine is working for you. You are not working for your morning routine. And I think that comes down to really getting. I'll take a step back, like really getting crystal clear on a purpose, getting really crystal clear on a vision, and then being able to reverse engineer your choices throughout the day, your schedule throughout the day, your routines, morning routine, nighttime routine around that vision and that purpose.
And then this is something that we've done a long time around here, and just in having the checklist in the morning and the night. What do you feel like that does in terms of benefits? How does that kind of play out? So if I connect it with my purpose and I'm doing things within my first hour that move toward that, how do you feel like that impacts kind of the rest of the day than the kind of bigger picture?
Well, I think, there's two ways to look at it. Like I am actually a believer that, there's the eat the frog philosophy where you do the toughest thing first in the morning. I'm actually kind of a believer that you want to do the opposite. You want to do the thing that gives you the most energy in the morning, and that will set you up for the rest of the day. So like doing the things that, for me, it's like the creative things. Like if I'm not creating something, I feel super, super, super stagnant. And so I'm trying to do something that is in that realm of creativity in the morning, whether that's writing, whether it's like creating something that I can put out into the world. Maybe not that day, but eventually it's going to be something that gets put out in the world to impact somebody. So I think that's a big thing to keep in mind when you're looking at those.
That's really good. And I haven't heard that in that frame before, but that makes complete sense because it is going to set you up the rest of the day in terms of energy.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, I think, and that's what it's all about, right? It's like we can have all the time in the world. And you know this from the work that you're doing, right? Lots of people think that time is their most valuable resource, but the truth is that energy is their most valuable resource. If I don't have the energy to put into the time, that time is useless, right? And so being able to figure out like where can I spend my time and be intentional with my energy and be intentional with the things that are in my areas of highest contribution. I don't know if this is like answering your question directly, but another exercise I'll take people through, especially when they're in a leadership position, is writing out a list of all your things that you have to do throughout the day, all your tasks, right? Or maybe not throughout the day, but like your responsibilities in your role, right? And then put them into one of two columns. You put them into the one column that these items give me energy, and the other column is the responsibilities, the roles, the tasks, whatever they are, that drain your energy. And then being able to delegate the ones that drain your energy so that you can spend your time in your area of highest contribution. And usually it's the things that give you energy where you are in your area of highest contribution.
I think this is super valuable. This goes back to the work of Jim Lohr, human performance expert from way back in the day. Do you feel like people need like a level of awareness to be able to see what's is this giving me energy or is it taking away? Or what's kind of a process that you have people to, is it just kind of a subjective feeling that people are expecting to have?
That's a good question. I don't have anything that's specific as like an assessment or anything like that, but I think it does come down to self-awareness. It comes down to emotional awareness. And I think, most people, if they get intentional about figuring out what drains their energy, what gives them energy, they have an awareness around it. But I think you have to create the space to really be intentional about it.
Yeah, I agree. And then I like what you said earlier about if you don't create earlier in the day, you feel stagnant. Like that's of course a form of energy. And then also being able to notice kind of how you feel as things progress throughout the day, whether this is a day of high performance, what I'm working toward, or I am feeling stagnant. Would you like to share a little bit about what you include in your morning routine?
Yeah, I used to fall into the bucket of doing, 19 million things and thinking that was the answer. And and that's where I kind of came up with, don't work for your morning routine. Make sure your morning routine is working for you. And one thing so I'll share what it is and I'll kind of share why I do things the way that I do them. I used to get up, get a workout in, go to cryotherapy, read, do meditation, eat my breakfast, do all these things before I started my day, right? And so what I realized is that we have for me, like my energy is at its highest from a production or creativity standpoint, a brain standpoint, a brain energy standpoint, in the beginning of the day, right? And so I need to utilize that mental space earlier in the day, not for getting a great workout in, but for creativity and productivity, right? What I realized is I was going and I was doing these workouts. I had this 2-hour morning routine, and it hit 9 o'clock in the morning, 9:30 in the morning, and I was exhausted, right? And so I kind of stripped it back, and I'm really, it's getting up, it's reading, it's a short meditation, and then I'll go right into some writing exercise, writing work, or creation.
That's awesome.
I think awareness is key. It's like everybody's talking about their morning routine and what works for them, but you have to know what works for you. You have to have the awareness. You can't just read something in a book and apply it directly to your life and think you're going to get the exact same results, because the truth is that you're operating from a different set of circumstances, a different mindsets, belief systems, energy levels than the person that wrote that book, right? Or posted that on LinkedIn or wherever it is. And I think like it's really key to have awareness around that.
I agree 100%. And then what about nighttime routine? Is there anything that you do in that kind of the last hour of your day that sets you up for a good night of sleep and sets you up for the morning?
Being fully transparent, my sleep is horrible. So I don't know if I'm the best person to speak to that. I just try to, and I know this is not a popular response, and maybe that's why I should share it. And I'm kind of maybe like it's a bit of a vulnerable share, but lots of times I've realized like that my mind will just not shut off at night. It's like constantly thinking about the next thing. What am I doing tomorrow? What are we working on? All right, and I realize that I need something to. Somebody shared this with me, but there's 3 different pillars, and maybe you're familiar with this, but like there's 3 different pillars of like sleep, not sleep hygiene, but like being able to put yourself into a state where you can sleep. One of them is lighting, right? Like not being around fluorescent lights, bright lights, not being on screens. That can affect your melatonin levels. It shuts down melatonin production. The other thing is relaxation, right? Like what can you do to slow your mind down? What can you do to put yourself into a state where you can relax? And I think the third one is room temperature, right? Being able to sleep in a colder room. I think it varies for everybody, but the general rule is like around 65 degrees is what's best for getting your most restorative sleep. Don't quote me on all that, but where I'm going with that is like I think I do a really good job staying off staying off screens. I do a good job of sleeping in a cool space. But lots of times my mind won't shut off, and I need something to shut my mind off. And lots of times my go-to is I'm watching Netflix. I'm watching a show at night, right?
Yeah.
It's like trying to bring, sometimes, our days are hard. They're stressful. We're working on things that matter to us. And I think it's important to bring levity into your day. And I think at night is for me is a good time to do that.
Yeah, I love that. And then
not the scientific answer.
No, beautiful answer. And I think that would be a good transition into, with a lot of your work, it seems like you talk about purpose, which is can be a statement that's pretty general, that can be put out in a lot of different ways. How do you kind of define it, and why do you feel like it's so important?
So I look at purpose as your contribution to something that's greater than yourself. Whether that is, whether that's clients, the world, community, family, just being in service of other people. That's the way that I define it.
And then when you speak, and then when you work with clients, why do you feel like this is something that should be on the table in terms of a topic that is going to help them move forward?
Yeah, well, I think, every single business exists to solve a problem, right? And within that problem lies your purpose, right? But I think, we sometimes just get caught in the monotony of our day to day. We're just clocking in, we're clocking out. And, a lot of people feel emotionally empty and void, right? They feel like they're we want our lives to mean something. We want to be able to do meaningful work and make a contribution. I think it's inherent within us. And but I do think it is different for everybody. The purpose doesn't mean that you have to go out and start a nonprofit, or you have to solve world hunger or cure cancer, right? It might, like I said, it might be contributing to something bigger than yourself, right? We talked about this before. We talked a lot about energy, but getting crystal clear on our purpose, a purpose that we can emotionally connect to, will help elevate energy levels. And those energy levels help us become more productive, drive more results, drive and sustain growth, right? So getting clear on that and what that is, what can you emotionally connect to is really important. There was McKinsey did a study during 2020 that showed, I think, like 2/3 of people were reflecting on their life purpose during COVID, when they had a time to shut down, when they had a time to reflect, and when all the client meetings and water cooler conversations and catered lunches and all these things were off the table, and what you were doing from 9 to 5 every day was stripped down to just the work itself, right? It really makes you reflect on what you're contributing to the world. And the truth is like, we spend 1/3 of our lives or more working, right? We want it to be something that we get fulfillment out of.
Yeah. And then you talk about this I think that when you work in organizations, you talk about this in your book, The Future of Leadership, that where you are connected with the purpose, that does increase energy within the organization. And then my question with that is, I noticed that myself running teams. And then in your experience back in the sporting world, working with really high level coaches, and then also with what you're teaching and working with executives now, what are some things that you've seen, and what are some things that you teach in terms of leaders to help them be able to communicate the purpose of their organization, so the team can feel aligned with that and feel that energy?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways that you could go about this, but I think number one is leadership has to get crystal clear on their individual purpose, their personal purpose, their personal values, and then how that connects to the organization. I think that's paramount, because they have to live it every single day. They have to model it every single day for other people to buy into it, right? Mm-hmm. Second thing is creating space, creating time. Managers, leaders, anybody that is responsible for leading somebody else in some way, shape, or form, creating space to uncover what drives them, what motivates them, right? Maybe not even in the workspace, but outside of the workspace, right? I think it's really, really important for leaders to be able to do that, and then they can create connections between their their work, their individual work, and how they're contributing, and how that's going to connect to somebody's goals, maybe within work or outside of work, right? Maybe it's a role that they want to get promoted to. It's a leadership position, a position of influence, a position of impact, something that they want to get to, and then you can create more intention with your day. And as a leader, you can help your people be more intentional about their day when you get clear on these things.
And then how do you feel like this is something that should be communicated daily? Do you feel like there should be kind of a culture set of standards? What are some things that might be best practices? Or okay, so leaders they've taken the time to create space and to figure out what personally kind of aligns with them, and then what do you feel are maybe some best practices to consistently be able to communicate that vision to their team?
Well, I think it's communicating the vision, but then I also think it is varying the context and how you communicate it, right? Because it's like it's the coach that the kids or the players start to drown out their voice 3 months into the season, right? And they need I honestly don't know the science behind it, but I'm sure there is. But it's where we start to tune messages out, right? I think that so being able to communicate it in a variety of ways, whether that's bringing in people outside of your organization to share values aligned messages with your organization, providing opportunities for them to maybe go deeper into their own personal purpose, right? So the whole like professional development side, I think is super important. But from I think it doesn't necessarily have to be around purpose, but I definitely think like if you are leading a team of 10, let's say I'm a middle management and I'm leading a team of 10 people, like you should be checking in and meeting with every single one of those people every single week, right? And I also don't think that anybody should ever be directly responsible for more than 10 people, because otherwise you can't spend enough time with them. You can't develop the connection and the relationship in order to influence and impact it at a deep level if you're responsible for more than 10 people.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then one of my favorite coaches who I've studied and learned from is Pat Riley. He's the president of the Miami Heat now. And he was someone who was obsessed with always looking for new ways to communicate the same message, the same theme, in terms of just because he recognized what you're talking about. You can't just say things the same way over and over again, because one, people are just going to show that you're not putting in the effort to think about different ways to do it, but also people are going to respond to different things. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's true as well. Like we all have different learning styles, right? And so being able to communicate a mass message like in different mediums is super important. But I also think what's equally as important is giving people the opportunity to take ownership in that, right? It's not just, hey, this is what we're doing and this is what we need you to do, right? Giving people to take ownership in that and really connect to what it means to them at a deeper level. And I think that's where the professional development and the meetings come in, is like bringing people in to take you through exercises to help you get to clarity to what that means to you, and then how you need to live that every day.
And then how do you feel like mindset connects with leadership? How did those things go together?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's cliche as it comes, but we can't lead anybody else until we can lead ourselves. And easy to say, incredibly difficult to do, right? So I think the mindsets and the values and the beliefs that we hold as a leader directly reflect on the products that we create, the services that we provide, the culture that is created within our organization. the relationship that we have with the people that we lead. All of these are a direct reflection of the mindsets, the beliefs, the values that we hold internally as a leader. And so I think that's why it's super important for leaders to really take the time to develop these within themselves before they are in a leadership position.
And then one of our programs here at Super Athlete is, we call it Super Athlete Body and Mind Transformation. And our guarantee, or what we communicate in terms of benefit, is we're going to get you in the best physical and mental condition of your life. What would that look like to you in terms of mental condition? Like, if you're someone, if I want to get in the best mental condition of my life, what would that look like in terms of maybe specific tools I'm using, effort I'm doing to control my thoughts, prioritizing, being resilient, or is what intuitively comes to mind for you when I say that?
God, there's so many answers. We could have a 19-hour conversation on that. I would say first and foremost, it is very unique to each individual. There are a lot of ways that I could answer this. So I would say number one, like, can you rephrase the question again? The question was around like, what would like lead level mind look like?
You in the best mental condition of your life, or a client of yours saying, Mike, get me in the best mental condition of my life. Like, what do you think would be some attributes or skills, or what's mentally that would what does that look like?
Yeah. So I'll talk about, I'll just throw out a bunch of stuff. Number one, first and foremost, if you are dealing with any sort of like anxiety, depression, mental health issues, inability to shut down, inability to self-regulate and be able to be centered and grounded. Number one, first and foremost, get a trauma-informed therapist.
Interesting.
That can work through that. We look at like anxiety and depression as like things that exist in and of themselves. But the truth is that anxiety and depression are all symptoms of trauma. They're all symptoms of a nervous system that is not able to get back to homeostasis, that's not able to regulate, right? So if you're doing the meditation, you're doing the yoga, you're practicing mindfulness, you're doing the gratitude journaling, you're reading, you're just reading, right? You're just working on yourself, right? And you're still dealing with those things, you need to get a trauma-informed therapist that can really help get into the unconscious, help you get back into your body, and heal things at the mind-body connection is very, very, very real. Like, there is no separation. Right. And a lot of trauma will manifest in the body as energy issues, digestive issues, chronic pain, inability to focus, right? Like, all these things, they're all symptoms of trauma. And so, the way I look at it is like, you heal the trauma and you'll heal your life. And then being in that mental state is just, the truth is that mental state that you're asking about is our natural state. I don't actually think that it's something that we need to, I think there's a balance between working towards it and then healing the things that we need to heal. And that state will be a natural byproduct of that process. Those are some things, from a very like granular level. Number one, I think practicing things like self-forgiveness, right? As a high performer, I'd be willing to bet that 99% of the people that you work with, right, are probably harder on themselves than they are on anybody else, right? And the truth is that, we think about there's a balance between holding yourself to high standards and also being able to forgive yourself when you don't meet them at the same time. Because until we forgive ourselves, we're stuck in the past. We're stuck in regret, guilt, shame, anger, right? And we're not in the present moment. And as you know, right, the present moment is the only place where getting into the zone, getting into flow state actually exists, right? So forgiveness is a super practical tool when we're talking about high performance. That's one. Another one is acceptance, right? Acceptance, not as in like I'm being a victim and I'm accepting something that maybe didn't go my way, or I'm not getting the results that I want, but being able to just accept what is in the moment, like being able to be in the state of non-resistance in the moment actually frees you up to be back in the present moment. Those are a couple ones that are top of mind.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And then, of course, anxiety and worry is usually connected with we're thinking about the past or we're thinking about the future, which, of course, inhibits us from being present. What are some tactics you believe people can apply to spend more time in being present? Other than
Great question. Because you're right. We live in this world of demands, distractions, and disruption, right? And it's pulling our attention and our energy out of the present moment. We, drift to the future into worry, anxiety, fear. We dwell in the past, regret, guilt, shame, or we get distracted, right? And the truth is that everything that we want in life, that we want in business, actually exists in the present moment. And so it is super, super, super important to be able to train yourself to be in the present moment. Things that we talked about already, right? Having a purpose, right? Being incredibly clear on your purpose will give you focus, right? I don't know who said this, but they said the purpose of goals is not to achieve them. The purpose of goals is to give you focus, right? When we have goals, now we have something to lock in on. And so I look at, purpose is the big overarching theme, our contribution to something bigger than ourselves. And then goals are like the steps to bring that to life, right? Those are our choices that we're making every single day, right? How we're deciding to spend our time every single day, where we're deciding to put our energy every day, right? That all goes back to purpose. And when we have that, we're able to be more in the present moment, right? We're able to spend more time with intention. The other piece of it is self-awareness, right? One of my friends is a performance psychologist, an incredibly smart guy. I had him on my podcast a few years ago, and he said, we talk a lot about sustained focus in high performance, but the truth is it's just as much about sustained awareness as it is about sustained focus. Mm-hmm. And what he means by that is that, yes, we can set a task, set a timer, try to lock in on that task, right? And try to get into this level of focus, right? We can create these flow triggers. But we also need to have the sustained awareness of when we get distracted, when our attention drifts, so that we can redirect our attention and energy back to the task at hand. All right. So it's those two things. It's sustained awareness as well as the sustained focus.
Yeah. The guy who founded Flow, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, talks about how does he frame it? The quality of your life is determined by our ability to put our attention where we want, when we want, for how long we want.
It's pretty accurate. Yeah.
Easier said than done.
Yeah, very true. Isn't that the case with all of this stuff?
Yeah. And then in your book, The Future of Leadership, you talk about some challenges that you had with depression back in Wisconsin. It seemed like you implied a little bit, potentially that was maybe lack of vitamin D a little bit that potentially was causing it. But I just love, the reason I bring this up here in this context was going through that and kind of learning these tools that help you kind of pivot on your path to put more of a focus on the mindset?
Is a question, did I learn things on that journey that have essentially, did like the adversity that I went through shift the path that I'm on? Is that kind of what you're asking?
Specifically within the form of mindset, where I'm guessing that learning these tools, I'm guessing, played a part in terms of, I might be making an assumption in terms of you overcoming that. But specifically,
I see. Was mindset a factor in overcoming depression? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
A lot of people will probably be surprised by this answer, but the answer is not really.
Mm-hmm.
What I learned about, and this is goes back to some of the things that I was talking about earlier with trauma, is, trauma lives in our body. And, we don't look at, like, it's interesting, if you get an injury playing football, right, and your elbow is in pain or whatever it is, you're going to get in an x-ray and get in an MRI, right? We don't do that with mental health. When we have access to, when we have access to imaging, to QEEG brain mapping that can give us data about what's going on in your brain, right? And I guess, to answer the question, like, I learned it's a lot more complex than just mindset and beliefs, significantly more complex than mindset and beliefs. Now, like, some of these things help you navigate through periods of it? Yeah, no question about it. I think number one, like, strategy first and foremost, with depression, right? Depression is usually, it's an internal focus, right? So number one, get out of your head and into your body, right? Whatever that means. That might be just getting outside and going for a walk. That might mean getting a workout in. That might mean going to a yoga class. That might even mean getting into conversation with somebody else where you can get the focus off of yourself. Do something to be in service of somebody else, right? Anything to get out of your head and into your body. Get out of your head and out into your external experience of the world. That would be probably the number one, like, practical thing that people can do without, going into therapy, doing EMDR, doing brain spotting, doing neurofeedback, and going down that whole route. Like,
Have you done it with brain spotting or neurofeedback?
I have, yes. The brain spotting, not so much, but EMDR, neurofeedback, yeah.
Okay. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that experience. Share a little bit.
Yeah. EMDR did not work for me at the time that I tried it. As I'm learning more about it, I'm learning that there's different levels to it, that, there are certain techniques that it can actually re-traumatize you. Maybe not techniques is not the right word, but certain, if a therapist pushes you too fast to go into the processing, it can re-traumatize you. And you really have to have somebody who knows what they're doing to walk you through that, to take you through that process. And I don't think I don't want to say that I wasn't with somebody who was qualified to do that, but I definitely think that there were things that, knowing what I know now, were not implemented in the most effective way possible. Neurofeedback, I did a lot of. Unfortunately, results from it just didn't really stick with me. I would go into a session. Sometimes I'd walk out, and an hour later, I'd feel amazing. I'd feel amazing for a few hours to a couple days, and then I would lose the results. And so, for whatever reason, the results just never stuck with me.
Yeah, the reason I'm asked is I'm intrigued with both of those. And is brain spotting, is that more common now? Like, that you can find that, in major cities to be able to get access to
brain spotting?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's supposed to be kind of like the next level of EMDR.
Okay.
And so I just actually, it's interesting we're talking about this because I just started working with somebody on this. We have not dove deep into it yet. But the interesting thing about it is, I know, and maybe this is your angle with it, I don't know. But I did not know. I just learned recently from the therapist that I'm working with that it also can be used as a tool to get you into flow state. And you can, I don't know the details about it or how it works, but it can be, it can be a resource for that. Athletes will use it. They'll pick a spot. The way she explained it to me was that they'll pick a spot on the field. They'll pick a spot on the court where somehow it triggers this expanded state of consciousness, right? And it triggers this space or this mental state where time and space disappear, and which is known as flow, or being in the zone, where time and space disappear, and you feel your best, you perform your best, is actually one of the most enjoyable states that we can be in life, right? You can use that to trigger that, and so hopefully I get there. Be an amazing tool to have, resource to have.
And then you call your latest book "The Future of Leadership." Why did you title it that?
Good question. I think we're at a point in time where, specifically in the corporate space, where people want to shift. People want to do meaningful work for leaders that care about them, that makes a greater impact on the world. And the truth is that the way a lot of organizations are run, not all, but a lot, is they're driven by KPIs and maximizing shareholder profits and maximizing top line revenue and bottom line revenue. And those are like the priorities. And I think, that's where we go back to where people are really reflecting on their purpose in life, right? And thinking about, like, am I spending my 8 hours a day, my 40 hours a week, my 50 hours a week in a way that makes me feel fulfilled, right? And I think, especially with younger generations, right, they are aware of like the impact of certain things that are happening in the world, like a big thing, sustainability, environmental impact, right? And these younger generations want to work for organizations and for leaders that are going to leave a mark on the world, that are going to create something that is making impact. And so I think there needs to be a shift, and I think there needs to be a shift in how we're showing up and how we're leading.
I agree with that 100%. And then what in terms of the latest generation and just feeling like they have more options? And then in the book you talked about, this is something I wanted to ask you because I kind of have my own thoughts on this, but
okay.
on
Do it.
How more it's now, entrepreneurship is now kind of considered cool, and it's more prevalent than ever. I'm not that old, but when I was growing up, I come from a family of entrepreneurs, but when I was growing up, it was not like, I want to be an entrepreneur. It's not like, it wasn't in kind of the cultural relevant spectrum.
Yeah.
What you were talking about is that there might be, if I understood correctly, more people going into entrepreneurship than have the, I don't know if you use the word skill set, that they kind of have what it takes to succeed at it. And I was wondering what your particular thoughts are, because I think a lot of it has to do with, it's a mental thing that determines how enjoyable and how successful it is for entrepreneurs. But I'd love to hear your specific thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. And I think that maybe I didn't clearly communicate it in the book, but I do agree with you. I just don't think that most people, I think there's a lot of people who look at entrepreneurship from the outside looking in and are like, oh my God, that would be amazing if I only had to work 4 hours a week like Tim Ferriss. And it's like, Tim Ferriss works more than 4 hours a week. like, right? Like, I think outside looking in, it's glorified. But the truth is, it's like I was alluding to earlier, like, and not everybody's in this position, but like when you're an entrepreneur, there is no off time. Like, you get an idea in the shower during a workout, and it's like you get that inspiration. It's like, and it's 9 o'clock this just happened to me last night. Like, it's 9 o'clock at night, you're back on, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, and so I think like the reality is that most people want the perks of entrepreneurship, but most people don't want to do the work, whether that's the actual work or the internal work, like the mindsets, the beliefs, the habits, right? The discipline, the focus, the resilience. They don't want to have to go through those things to get the perks, right? And so I think while the barrier to entry has never been lower, I also don't think as many people are cut out for it as they say they are, or that want to be in that space.
Yeah, I agree from the perspective that I think life brings uncertainty for everybody, but I think a lot of it's probably genetic in terms of how risk averse people are, than how much you can handle that uncertainty. And you better be able to handle uncertainty as an entrepreneur. If not, then the pain is much higher than the reward. So that's my specific personal take on it.
I totally agree. I think the uncertainty threshold, the risk threshold, the stress tolerance threshold, right? It's just at a different level.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think most people are, I shouldn't say most people, but I just don't think everybody's willing to go through that.
Yeah, it's tough. And then
nor should everybody. You know what? Like it isn't for everybody. And you know what? It's amazing to be like, it's amazing to be a killer number 2 or number 3 or number 10 or 15 or whatever it is, right? It's like we need those people too.
Yeah, especially if they're able to be a part of organizations, like you said earlier, that have that purpose and bring that energy. And then you brought up that word stress there for the first time. From your perspective, in terms of mindset and leadership, how do you kind of view stress? Do you feel like kind of it's something that's necessary? Do you feel like we want to try and minimize stress, want to conquer stress? How do you view stress?
Great question, man, because this is something that I've been really trying to figure out how to communicate my viewpoints on this. And I actually, since I have not fully fleshed this out yet, I actually am grabbing something that's in my notebook right now.
I love
that I'll share. So you're not gonna be able to see this, but I want to like kind of read off it, because it's like, I think it's super important for people to have awareness around. But the way I look at it is like, we have 3 different zones that we can be in, right? And part of this I got from Daniel Coyle. He wrote the book Talent Code, the Talent Code, Culture Code, and one other book. But what's that?
He had that one that connected with the Talent Code, Little Book of Talent too. That was really good.
Little Book of Talent, right? But what he talks about in the Talent Code is essentially, in the Talent Code, he goes and he researches essentially what does it take to develop top talent. I read this book like 15 years ago, so I might be butchering it, but that's essentially the theme of the book. And he goes to all these hotbeds of talent where there are sports organizations. He goes in sports, arts, and he goes into these institutes where they're just like pumping out top talent. And he kind of demystifies what talent actually is. And one thing that he talks about in the book is I don't know exactly what he calls it, but essentially there's like our comfort zone, right? Mm-hmm. And when we're in our comfort zone, this circle that is our comfort zone, right? That's the area that we don't grow, right? It's an area where we get bored. It's an area where we don't find enjoyment. We're not challenged, right? Where we want to be is and then there's our comfort zone, right? And then there's our like challenge zone or our growth zone. And that's the zone that is like one step outside of our comfort zone. And it's a space where we're having some success, but we're also having some setbacks, some quote unquote failures. I don't like to use that word, but right, we're in that space. But it's not so far outside of the space that it's so challenging that we want to quit, right? It's so overwhelming that we want to quit. And so to bring it back to your question, I've kind of put it into these 3 zones. It's like, number 1, it's our comfort zone, right? We don't want to be in our comfort zone. Number 2, it's our challenge zone or our growth zone, right? And that's the one right outside of our comfort zone. And where we don't want to be is this chronic stress zone, right? When we stay in this space of overwhelm, when we stay in this space of chronic stress, right? As you know, from the work you do, it manifests as all these different things, right? It leads to nervous system dysregulation, things we talked about, health issues, poor performance, brain fog, inability to focus, all these things when we spend too much time in that chronic stress zone. Right. I guess some of the things that I wrote down here, like the comfort zone is where, we get boredom fatigue, and the challenge zone is where the challenge zone, right? The one that's just outside of our comfort zone, right? It does involve a certain level of stress, but in psychology, they call it eustress, where it's a positive stress. The distress is the chronic stress, when it's just, you're in this constant state of overwhelm. But when we're in this challenge zone is when we are more likely to hit optimal states of performance. We're more likely to be in flow state and get into the zone. So we need a little stress to put us into that growth zone, but not so much stress that we override our nervous system and ability to regulate, and it manifests as all these external things that are not productive as a leader, as a performer.
That's really good, and that's really relevant. Have you ever read the book Top Dog, The Science of Winning and Losing?
I have not, no.
We had 2 times New York Times bestselling author Ashley Merriman on the show last week, and in this episode we just talked about that specific book, Top Dog, which is really about competition and kind of the science of competition and how it's good for us. And one of the big takeaways that she had from that, and what she communicated on the show, was competition, for the most part, for humans is really good because it's about improvement and it leads to improvement. But she talks about it's good because it creates a higher level of improvement and performance because it puts us in that challenge response state. But where it gets not helpful is, I don't know how you specifically termed it there, but she termed it, and it was a different frame, but a threatening response. Like basketball, if you're playing somebody and they're up 140 at halftime, if you don't change the frame of, come on, we still got to win this, then it's not gonna lead to any sort of improvement. But again, just going back to the very similar theme of finding ways to get into that challenge zone. And then, so competition would be something specifically that we could do to get into that challenge zone. Do you have any other specific ideas on thoughts on how people can do that kind of day to day? Stretch goals, of course, of another common one.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I'll answer that question in a different way. I think maybe it's not every day, but it's like it's always doing something that makes you uncomfortable. I'll give you an example. During COVID, didn't do it intentionally, like around around like what we're talking about right now. But during COVID, I learned to surf, and I was, that was definitely out of my comfort zone. But I think what it did is it helps. You want to put yourself in a situation where, like, there is God, what's the way I want to phrase it? Put yourself in a situation where there's almost like a perceived threat, but in reality, there's not an actual threat. Like, it can be scary to get thrown off a 4 or 5 foot wave and have the Pacific Ocean crush you, right? And you think that you're going to drown while you're spinning around in the water, right? The truth is like, relatively speaking, at that level, like when you're a beginner, like, it's a safe thing for you to do. I got hurt, and I was definitely got banged up, and had my fair share of injuries, but, like, relatively speaking, it was a safe thing for me to do, but it felt very uncomfortable. Right. And so I think finding things like that to do, like, maybe challenging yourself on a hike, or like pushing yourself. Here's one thing, like, that I do believe in, is that physical toughness builds mental toughness. Right. So building out some sort of goal for yourself, whether this is like an extreme example, but like doing Ironman or something like that, where you're like setting some extreme goal, or like getting yourself into a position where you have to push yourself physically outside of your comfort zone, right? And then have the awareness of being able to bring that back into your life. One of the, I'll give you an example from yoga. One of the teachers that I used to have, he used to always say, learn how to breathe through difficult poses. Because when you can breathe through difficult poses in a room that's 103 degrees, you can learn how to breathe through difficult things in life, right? And move through them with more ease, with more flow, right? And so that's another example, right? Could go to a challenging yoga class where you're going to be pushed physically, and you can bring that back with you into your life.
That's really good. And it makes me Michael Jordan was like the king of finding ways to create specific challenges or motivation that usually were not there. As a great example of someone who he would say that this random guy on the team had told him he was a bum, and he would drop 40 on him, and then so Jordan would go off talking shit the whole night, and you find out that the guy didn't even say anything to him. But that goes back to the biggest takeaway I had from this interview with Ashley, who wrote Top Dog, is how powerful the brain is, and then how dumb it is at the same time. So in terms of like what you're talking about, like we can create these frames of making it potentially in a way that puts us in more of a challenge state, easier than we think, to create higher levels of growth and higher levels of improvement, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, another example is like in the basketball world, we used to have certain parameters around drills. Like once your form was down, once your technique was down, all right, now we're going to set some parameters. And some of those would be, it'd be total made shots. It would be made shots in a minute. It'd be made shots within a specific game action. It would be, all different types of scenarios, a specific number of made shots within a certain time frame from different spots on the floor, right? So setting parameters like this. And what it does is like, you ask it, you can tell a player, hey, go out there at the 3-point line and I'll rebound for you and you shoot, versus you got to hit 5 threes from these 5 different spots all the way around the arc within 90 seconds, right? Which one creates a deeper level of focus, right? So we can do that, in the business space. Like, I know like not everybody on this call is somebody that, or on this podcast is somebody that's in a creative space, but one thing that I'll do is I literally have a timer on my computer. It's quite literally called Flow Timer. And I'll set it, and I'll set a task to complete within that certain time frame. It might be a writing exercise. It might be cleaning out your inbox. It might be creating a piece of content. It might be editing a video, something. Just having that time and a goal within the time frame will take your focus to another level.
I think that's really helpful. And I think that's a great practical application. Cool. Well, Mike, this has been amazing, man. Super helpful. Highly recommend your book, The Future of Leadership. Thank you so much for coming on Super Athlete Radio today. And what's the best way for people to connect with you?
LinkedIn, Instagram, I'm at Who is Mike Lee. Our website is mindshiftlabs.com. Appreciate you having me on, man. It's great to be here.
Yeah, no, you absolutely killed it. You were home run like I knew you would be, and I look forward to meeting you in person. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, man.